Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you've just found this place, then welcome, and if you're returning, I'm glad to have you back. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we explore and theory craft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons. Today, we have a requested build from a couple different users. Glitch King asked to see a single class Eldritch Knight build. This is also specifically a Dex-based dual wielder that uses only the 2024 Player's Handbook. A little while later, Droon Metten asked to see a Eldritch Knight build as well, built as either a 2-weapon fighter or as a great weapon master. They also mentioned that they've been seeing a lot of the Magic Initiate Shillelagh combo for the Eldritch Knight, which admittedly is a very powerful build, but today we're going to be avoiding that combo and looking at two other ways to do Eldritch Knights: the Dex-based dual wielder and the strength-based great weapon fighter. So because of that, I will be structuring the video a bit differently. We're not going to be going through the build level by level or looking at different tiers of play. Because we are just a full Eldritch Knight fighter, we're not really getting a whole lot of choices along the build besides from the feats that we pick up. With all that said, let's jump into our two builds. Starting off the builds in character creation, we're going to begin with our dual wielder. For our lineage, we are going to pick elf. Not because we have to, but because I think it is thematically pretty on point to make our archetypal Dex-based dual wielder an elf, though you could pick any species that you want to, and as far as elf goes, any species of elf can certainly work. Looking at our background now, here we have our first minor catch. If we are restricted to just the 2024 Player's Handbook, then in that case, we have to use the backgrounds that have origin feats already set. We can't go grab one from a previous source book or use the 2024 DMG to make a custom background. This would just mean that we don't actually get to pick the exact stat boosts and origin feat that we want, which is a little unfortunate, but we can still make it work. So, if we're just using the 2024 Player's Handbook, nothing else, we're going to take the criminal background. That way we can boost our Dexterity by +2 and our Constitution by +1, and we'll get the Alert feat to go along with it, which feels thematically on point. If, however, you were able to get the origin feat and stat boosts of your choice by picking a different or custom background, then in that case, we still want Dexterity boosted by +2 and Constitution by +1, but we'd rather take Magic Initiate Wizard in order to pick up Mage Armor right away at level 1 and get a once per day for free casting of it. This will save us spell slots down the line, and it is the equivalent of +1 studded leather armor, so it's the best AC we could get at level 1 for a typical adventuring day, even though it does only last 8 hours. We'd also get some cantrips along with it, which could be pretty nice, but for the sake of the build as presented, we'll go with criminal, we'll take alert, and we'll still boost that dexterity and constitution. Speaking of, we're going to want the following array of ability scores. We want 8 strength, 17 dexterity, 16 constitution, 14 intelligence, 10 wisdom, and 8 charisma. Diving into our actual build for our dual wielder now, before we look at anything else, let's talk about the fighting style feat we're going to want to pick up right away at level 1, as well as what weapon masteries we're going to be building around. The dual wielder is kind of hedged in to what they want for both of these without really giving us much of a choice. For fighting style feat, we definitely want 2-weapon fighting in order to gain that extra bonus damage from any extra attack that is the result of making an attack with a weapon with the light property. 2-weapon fighting is the reason we would become a dual wielder, so we kind of have to pick it. Looking at weapon masteries, well, we get 3 to learn as a first level fighter, and there only are 3 weapon masteries across every single dexterity finesse based weapon. So unless you want to pick up a weapon mastery for a ranged weapon or a strength based weapon or something else, we're taking Vex from a Vex weapon, probably the short sword. We're taking the Nick weapon mastery from either a scimitar or a dagger if you wanted to do that. And then we're taking the slow weapon mastery, which is the only other weapon mastery that appears on a finesse light weapon, and that is on the whip. We definitely want a Nick weapon, so that way our extra attack that we make from activating the generic 2-weapon fighting rules is going to be able to be made as part of the attack action rather than as a bonus action. Your other weapon, though, in your main hand or offhand, because it doesn't really matter which one the Nick weapon is in, can then either be a Vex weapon like the short sword, or a whip to apply that slow weapon mastery if you want a little bit more control. Like I said, there's not a lot of choice here for our dual wielder. We're really hedged into those 3 weapon masteries. We could technically expand our horizons to 4 by picking up the push weapon mastery from the club if we had been able to grab Magic Initiate Druid to pick up Shillelagh. The issue there is that it wouldn't be dexterity based, it would be based off of a spell casting ability modifier of our choice, which could be intelligence, as intelligence is modest, but it's not necessarily what we're trying to achieve in this build. Looking at the full feats we're going to pick for our dual wielder now, I'm gonna just go through the list of what feat we pick up and when, and I'll explain why we want each one or why we made each choice at the end. First up, at level 4, typically I would say Elven Accuracy on an Elf dual wielder, especially if we're using the 2024 rules and we have access to the Vex weapon mastery, because they just pair so nicely together. However, again, 2024 Player's Handbook only, we're instead going to pick up Defensive Duelist. Level 6, we then pick up the Dual Wielder feat. Level 8, we're going to go and grab Shadow Touched out of all things. Level 12 is going to be Mage Slayer with a small asterisk depending on if you could or did pick up Elven Accuracy. Level 16 is going to be a +2 increase to either our Constitution or Intelligence depending on which one you value more in the build at the time you achieve level 16. So you got a long time to think about it if you're doing a full campaign with this type of character. And finally at level 19 we get an epic boon, of which I'm going to say pick your favorite, because while a pure theory crafted build might care about something like Irresistible Offense for more damage, really I think almost any epic boon can work with either of these Eldritch Knight builds. We can have a lot of fun with our dual wielder gaining the ability to teleport around a whole lot, being super speedy, or maybe being a skulker in the shadows, gaining a bunch of bonuses there. There's a lot that you can do with these epic boons. Pick whichever one you feel is either mechanically powerful, if that's all you want, or thematically appropriate at the time you get to level 19. So why did we take those dual wielder feats, and why did we take them when we did? Well, I picked Defensive Duelist up first because it rounds off our dexterity to 18, but also it lets us use our reaction to increase our AC by an amount equal to our proficiency bonus for a full round, essentially acting as a mini shield. Picking this up at level 4 means we're going to be able to use it throughout the course of a campaign, or few adventures at least, depending on how long you're playing this character, and it's right before we actually get to level 5 where our proficiency goes up to +3, but also right after we picked up those 2 Eldritch Knight spell slots. Typically, an Eldritch Knight probably wants to save their spell slots for the shield spell. And while you still can and maybe even should do that, just because shield provides such a high bonus, having Defensive Duelist, especially right before we hit level 5, gives us that extra option of using it and saving those spell slots in a pinch. Maybe an enemy beats our AC by just 1 or 2. Instead of spending shield, blowing it for the whole round, which maybe no more enemies even attack us afterwards, we can use Defensive Duelist, gain the AC bonus, block the attack, and carry on our merry way, saving our spell slot for something else. Dual Wielder comes in at level 6 because it can push our dexterity to 19. It allows us to more easily stow or draw 2 weapons. If your DM is a real stickler for what weapons you're drawing and when you draw them and things like that, then of course we probably switch this with Defensive Duelist, taking this first, so we don't have that hassle as much. Dual Wielder we take at 6 because we've got an extra attack at level 5. We have the Nick Weapon Mastery, allowing us to make the typical 2-weapon fighting extra attack as part of the attack action. Enhanced Dual Wielding then comes in to allow us to make an extra attack as a bonus action once we take the attack action and use a light weapon as part of that action. Shadow Touched coming in at level 8 is admittedly a bit of a gimmick for me because I really like the Shadow Touched feat. I think it could be thematically cool for an Eldritch Knight to be more of like this shadow fighter, shadowy warrior. Mechanically though, it gives us access to Wrathful Smite, which is pretty awesome. We get Wrathful Smite once per day for free, and on top of that we can cast it again with any spell slots we have. Now we just picked up Dual Wielder, which gives us a permanent bonus action to use. It's that extra bonus action attack when we attack with a light weapon as part of the attack action. If there is any time where we feel that just extra damage on one attack is going to be better than making that extra attack, that's where Wrathful Smite comes in. It does provide a fear effect, which we can boost at level 10 with the Eldritch Knights Eldritch Strike feature, since after we reach that level, every attack we make passively causes an enemy to have disadvantage against the next saving throw they make against spells we cast. Level 12 was Mage Slayer, and we take this here because we didn't really need to take it earlier, but we do still want it on the build. Technically, if we took Elven Accuracy instead of Defensive Duelist earlier, Defensive Duelist is probably the better option here. Assuming we took Defensive Duelist earlier in the build, grabbing Mage Slayer just allows us to cap off our Dexterity. It allows us to passively apply disadvantage to enemy concentration saving throws whenever we deal damage to them. So now not only is Eldritch Strike giving them passive disadvantage against our spell saves, but we're also applying passive disadvantage to their concentration saves if they are concentrating. Also, the mini legendary resistance for mental saves is pretty helpful on this build, given that our mental stats aren't that great besides intelligence. The +2 to Constitution or Intelligence is pretty self-explanatory. We would pick whichever one we feel like promoting on this build. If you want more durability, Constitution is the great workhorse option, but if you wanted to boost your spell casting and something like Wrathful Smite a little bit, increasing your Intelligence to 18 isn't that bad of an option, given that you'd have an 18 Intelligence plus apply disadvantage on those spell saving throws with every hit you make. Finally, the Epic Boon. Already explained this, but pick your favorite. There's a lot of options that could be both mechanically powerful or thematically fun. Looking at our origin for our Great Weapon Fighter now, if the Dual Wielder and Great Weapon Fighter are two sides of the same coin, then I think it only makes sense if we pick a lineage or species that is of the other side of the same coin as our elf. And this means we are gonna pick Dwarf. Dwarves in 2024 have had a big change. Pretty much all the subspecies have been removed, and instead the dwarfs have just been consolidated into a single species. And now they actually get quite a lot of nice features. They have dark vision out to a range of 120 feet. They have Dwarven Resilience, giving them resistance to poison damage flat out, as well as advantage on saving throws against the poisoned condition. They've got Dwarven Toughness for extra hit points right away. And they have Stone Cunning, probably one of the features that should be nominated for Most Improved Feature. Stone Cunning now says that as a bonus action, we can give ourselves Tremor Sense out to a range of 60 feet, so long as we are standing or touching a stone surface. That stone surface can be natural or carved, meaning that really covers quite a lot of the environments we're going to be adventuring in, especially if we're doing typical dungeon crawling. But the best part is that we can use this bonus action a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus and regain all uses on a long rest. So what background would we take to go with this dwarf? Well, luckily there's one in the 2024 Player's Handbook that is exactly what we want, so we don't have to worry about a previous edition sourcebook or making a custom one from the DMG rules. And that one that we want is Farmer. Farmer's going to let us increase our strength by +2 and our constitution by +1, while giving us the tough feat to get us even more hit points on top of that Dwarven Resilience. If you were going to take a background from a previous source book or the custom background and you were going to get to pick the origin feat of your choice, Magic Initiate Cleric is a good contender as well, given that we would be able to pick up the Shield of Faith spell, which our Eldritch Knight normally won't get access to, granting our Great Weapon Fighter a +2 AC as part of that concentration spell, and we can cast it once per day for free from the Magic Initiate feat, but also we can cast it again with any spell slots we gain, allowing us to be tempted away from just using our Eldritch Knight spell slots for things like Shield, and maybe influencing us towards that Shield of Faith route to gain a bit more constant AC. The choice is up to you, but we're going to go with Farmer and Tough for the build as presented. Finally, what are those stats looking like? Well, with a +2 bonus to Strength and a +1 bonus to Constitution, we want the following array of ability scores: 17 Strength, 8 Dexterity, 16 Constitution, 14 intelligence, 10 wisdom, and 8 charisma. Yes, the exact same as our dual wielder, just flipping dexterity and strength. Going into the actual build for our great weapon fighter, looking at our first level fighting style feat that we're going to get to pick up, as well as our weapon masteries there, we have a little bit more choice than our dual wielder ever did. For our fighting style feat, you might think that we want to pick up Great Weapon Fighter, but really it's actually not all that cracked up to be. Whereas the 2-weapon fighting style feat is like a necessity for a dual wielder, since it gives you flat extra damage on top of those dual wielding attacks that you make, the Great Weapon fighting style feat just raises our minimum and average damage ever so slightly. It's no longer a reroll like it was in 2014. Instead, now in 2024, anytime we roll a 1 or a 2 on the damage dice, we treat it as a 3. That's okay, and you can grab it if you want to, but we don't really need to feel hedged into it. It's not going to make or break this build. And because of that, we could have some fun picking some other fighting style feats that might give us a little bit more flavor or maybe a different mechanical advantage. For example, we could take defense to gain a flat +1 AC. We already have a whole lot of health. Grabbing an extra +1 AC is going to make us even more durable. On the flip side, we could grab blind fighting for a 10-foot blind sense. That's not going to be too much and will only situationally be powerful, but we could flavor it as a permanent always-on tremor sense. Yes, blind sense and tremor sense are different, but for our purposes, they can be flavored to be similar at the very least. And then, if we do get into a big combat that is taking place on stone or in a stone environment, we can activate our bonus action, getting the real tremor sense out to 60 feet, and flavor that as us expanding this passive 10-foot extra sensory awareness into a full 60-foot range. Basically, adding more dwarven flavor to our dwarf Eldritch Knight. Essentially, this is all a fancy way to say feel free to pick whatever fighting style feat you actually want for this dwarf. I'll say for simplicity's sake that we take defense just so we have that +1 AC and it's like a numerical bonus, but you don't have to feel roped into any one specific fighting style. For weapon masteries, we also have a bit more choice. There are 4 weapon masteries across every single heavy 2-handed melee weapon, which is what we're going to want to pick up for our Great Weapon Fighter, and most of these weapon masteries appear on multiple weapons, so you can feel free to pick whichever ones of these you like. We get 3 to start with as a level 1 fighter, so we won't be able to get all of them, but as we level up, we eventually will. Of those weapon masteries, we can get Cleave, Topple, Push, and Graze. Up to you which ones and which weapons you use for this build. There's a lot of fun we can have with any of them. Personally, I like the Great Axe getting Cleave as its weapon mastery and pairing that, eventually at least, with Green Flame Blade. However, technically Green Flame Blade is not part of the 2024 Player's Handbook. Depending on how restrictive you want to be, you might not actually pick that up. And even then, technically speaking, the Halberd is a little bit better than the Great Axe because it has that extra reach and can work with Pole Arm Master. You pick whatever weapon you like. I am partial to the Great Axe because I like the D12, and I think it would be fun to be a dwarf wielding a Great Axe running into battle, so we'll go with that for the sake of this build. Looking at the feat breakdown for our Great Weapon Fighter, just like the Dual Wielder, I'm going to go through and list each one that we're taking and when, and then after we'll come back and say why we're taking it and why we took it when we did. Right off the bat at level 4, we're taking Great Weapon Master, our namesake feat. Level 6, we're going to take Charger, or the Heavy Armor Master feat. Level 8, Shadow Touched, just like our Dual Wielder. 12, Mage Slayer, again, no surprise, just like our Dual Wielder. 16, +2 Constitution or +2 Intelligence, what do you know, just like our Dual Wielder. And finally at 19, our Epic Boon. Same rules as our Dual Wielder apply. Pick your favorite because there are a lot that could be mechanically powerful, but also a lot that could be thematically fun and flavorful for this great weapon fighting dwarf character. So, why did we take them when we did? Well, starting off at level 4 with Great Weapon Master, I took this one really early because I like using it. I think it makes sense that especially if you were going to play this character over the course of a campaign, so you get the most use out of it. There is an argument to be made to waiting till after level 5. You have extra attack and you increase your proficiency bonus. However, grabbing at level 4 means we just have to wait 1 level and then we gain all those bonuses anyways. I think the best situation where you would want to delay Great Weapon Master for a different feat is if you were going the polearm route and wanted to pick up Polearm Master earlier, but since we're focusing on a Great Axe with Cleave, we aren't too worried about that. Going up and looking at the Charger feat or Heavy Armor Master feat, the reason I take these at 6 is because 1, I wanted to take Great Weapon Fighter earlier, but for the Heavy Armor Master feat, at this point our proficiency is +3, so it's not the end of the world if we do grab it, since it, number 1, increases our strength, and number 2, gives us flat damage reduction equal to our proficiency bonus towards piercing, bludgeoning, and slashing damage. So that's just a nice boost to our durability. The Charger feat is for a funny playstyle combo. It also would let us increase our strength. But on top of that, if we are able to charge into our enemies, then we can deal either extra damage or give a free push without needing the push weapon mastery. This can be really helpful for setting up cleaves. We could charge into one enemy. If we hit them with an attack, then push them 10 feet. And ideally, if they end up beside a second enemy, we walk up, we still have extra attack. We attack either enemy with that extra attack, and if we hit, we cleave into the other one. All around a nice small synergy that feels really appropriate for a dwarf to just go charging into their enemies head first. Level 8, we're taking Shadow Slayer for the same reasons I talked about in our Dual Wielder, but for us it's actually a little bit better. The Dual Wielder has the enhanced dual wielding feature from the dual wielding feat that is a constant bonus action. They always have the option to make that extra attack should it trigger. For us, we don't have that. We have Hew from Great Weapon Master, but that isn't a constant bonus action. What does that mean for us? It means a little less analysis paralysis, honestly. When we're going through our turn and attacking our enemies, our bonus action is still completely open. If we want to use it for extra damage, we can dump a Wrathful Smite in. If we get a critical hit or we think we're going to drop an enemy to 0, we can save that bonus action to make the Hew extra attack if that's what we feel like doing. Or if we are in desperate need for some healing, we can do Second Wind and not feel bad about having to choose between Second Winding ourselves or dealing damage. Overall, we have a lot of bonus actions to use, but there's none that are permanently always on for us. We don't feel like we have to choose between that permanent one and one of these limited resource options. Keep in mind that if you were going the polearm route and had picked up Polearm Master, that would be something you'd have to consider, given you'd be giving up the bonus action polearm boop in order to do Second Wind, Wrathful Smite if you grab it, or even the Hew bonus action as well. Up to level 12, we take Mage Slayer for the exact same reasons our Dual Wielder took them. Level 16, same reasoning as our Dual Wielder. The +2 to Constitution really boosts our durability, and on this build in particular, with the amount of health we have, might be fun to just keep stacking that health. Finally, again, epic boon, pick your favorite, lots of cool options. Maybe it would be cool to take the boon of the Night Spirit of all things on this dwarf warrior and flavor them as someone who is used to fighting in the Underdark or underground in shadowy corridors and has a bunch of bonuses because of that. One thing I realize I missed from both builds is the level 14 feat, but luckily it's the same no matter which build we take because these two builds are supposed to be different sides of the same coin, so there's a lot of overlap between them. And that is Warcaster. Warcaster allows us to round off our intelligence at 16, and when we make an opportunity attack, we can exchange that opportunity attack with a weapon for the casting of a spell. That's pretty cool and makes us feel more like an Eldritch Knight, weaving their spell casting into their attacks, given that we already got War Magic way back at level 7, but also advantage on concentration saves is really awesome. We already have proficiency in concentration saves just from the merit of being a fighter, so it's not like we're in dire straits to pick something up to boost those concentration saves. However, having advantage plus proficiency means we are very likely to succeed on those concentration saving throws, and we've got some pretty solid concentration spells such as haste that we definitely don't want to lose in the middle of combat. And besides that, those are the two builds. Overall, we are certainly 2024 Player's Handbook Eldritch Knights. We've found ways to make both builds work fairly well and be fairly flavorful using exclusively the 2024 Player's Handbook, though admittedly there are some interesting and powerful mechanical synergies that can be found in features outside of that book as well. Elven accuracy on our Dual Wielder would be impeccable. Grabbing Green Flame Blade to use with our War Magic feature on our Great Weapon Fighter who's swinging around their Great Axe that cleaves into enemies and makes us a really good Horde Breaker. The feats that overlap between the two builds as well are completely optional, technically. But I liked the mirroring of the two builds as different sides of the same coin, and those feats I personally find interesting on a Eldritch Knight. Boosting our intelligence with feats like Warcaster as well as Shadow Touched is nice in itself. It actually feels like we are trying to be an Eldritch Knight who cares a little bit about intelligence rather than just sticking with shield or other spells that don't care about our spellcasting ability modifier. But they also give us really nice abilities. The one other thing I did not talk about in either build, since we were focused more on choices and feats, is the level 9 feature Tactical Master. Tactical Master allows us to get around our weapon mastery restrictions for both builds by swapping out the weapon mastery that our weapon has with either push, sap, and slow. That feature is pretty good in and of itself, given that it gives us that extra versatility, access to a little bit more control if we need it, but it does definitely do a little bit more in my mind on our 2-weapon fighter build, given that it effectively doubles the amount of weapon masteries that they can really use, since there's only 3 weapon masteries on finesse-based light weapons. Besides that though, those are both the builds. Let me know what you thought of them, or what you would add or change to try and capture an Eldritch Knight using just the 2024 rulebook, and as either a Dual Wielder or Great Weapon Fighter. Would you pick up Shillelagh? Would you go Polearm Master? I'm guessing the answer is yes, because they are both very powerful features, but let me know. As always, thank you so much for coming on the journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.